In this video, we are going to see about the poem Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. This video is presented by R Aravind, Assistant Professor, Department of English, JJ College of Arts and Science, Pudukkottai. Now we are going to see about Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson was born on December 10, 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts. Dickinson's poetry was heavily influenced by the metaphysical poets of 17th century England, as well as her reading of the Book of Revelation and her upbringing in a Puritan New England town, which encouraged a Calvinist, orthodox, and conservative approach to Christianity. She admired the poetry of Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning as well as John Keats. Though she was dissuaded from reading the verse of her contemporary Walt Whitman by rumors of its disgracefulness, the two poets are now connected by the distinguished place they hold as the founders of a uniquely American poetic voice. While Dickinson was extremely prolific and regularly enclosed poems in letters to friends, she was not publicly recognized during her lifetime. The first volume of her work was published posthumously in 1890 and the last in 1955. She died in August in 1886. Before we see the line-wise explanation of the poem, we will have a short introduction about the poem Because I Could Not Stop for Death. Because I Could Not Stop for Death is one of Emily Dickinson's most celebrated poems and was composed around 1863. In the poem, a female speaker tells the story of how she was visited by death, personified as a kind gentleman, and taken for a ride in his carriage. This ride appears to take the speaker past the symbols of the different stages of life before coming to a halt at what is most likely her own grave. The poem can be read both as the anticipation of a heavenly Christian afterlife and as something altogether more bleak and down to earth. Much of its power comes from its refusal to offer easy answer to life's greatest mystery: what happens when people die. Now we are going to have a line-wise explanation of a poem. Now I'm going to read the first stanza of the poem, then we will have a clear explanation about a poetical answer of first stanza. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage guilt but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove. He knew no haste and had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. In this stanza, the speaker represents the human race when she declares that she is too busy to think about death. It has become our primordial instinct to survive through all the difficulties posed by a community. But death never forgets and comes after those whose time in this realm is over. To the speaker, death is kind and its offer a chariot to take her away. There is a lot of perplexity about the inclusion of immortality in the last line of the stanza, as the speaker says that the chariot has death, her, and immortality. The reason for the inclusion of the word can be only understood from the meaning of the last stanza. The speaker consider death as Hoover who shows civility in his manners. She expresses pleasantness about the steady handling of the chariot by death. In response, she forgets all her labor and leisure to enjoy the ride. This description of the chariot ride can be interpreted as a smooth passing of the soul after death, and the person has left the world without having to struggle too much nor with pain. Now I am going to read the poetical ends of second stanza. We passed the school where children strove at races. In the ring, we passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew querying and chill for only gossamer my gown, my tipped only tulle. In this stanza, because I could not suffer death, through three various description gives a complete cycle of the chariot passes children playing joyfully, indicating the innocent childhood. The grazing grain attaining fruitfulness, indicating manhood, and the setting sun dawning light, indicating the old age where one waits for the darkness to take over. The speaker shows uncertainty about the passing of the sun, as he feels that they didn't pass over, but it was the sun who crossed them. This glimpses that the speaker is resting somewhere, and it is her soul traveling in the chariot. The realization slowly creeps into the speaker as she feels the chill and understands the way she dresses, which is inappropriate for a pleasant chariot ride, and feels as if it is an abrupt gesture. Now we are going to see the next stanza of the poem. We passed before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible. The cornice in the ground since then ties centuries and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horse heads were toward eternity. The chariot paws at her grave, which she calls as her house, and it is nothing but a swelling on a ground. It is indeed no house but the speaker's grave, where she rests and watches the world eternally. The journey of the speaker, after witnessing different marvels of the world, pauses at the grave and goes on. This indicates that there is an afterlife for her and she must continue her journey. The grave is only the resting place. The first line of the last stanza, in Because I Could Not Suffer Death, reveals that it has been centuries since the death of speaker, although it was so many years ago. She feels the memory as fresh and it feels as if it happened on that very day. She believes that it is the day she died when the horses of the chariot were pointing her towards eternity. It is the reason for the inclusion of immortality in the first stanza, as death, though appears to be gentleman, apprehends the soul for eternity, and one has to journey through without any respite. The poem Because I Could Not Suffer Death deals with heavy subjects such as death, time, and eternity, but Emily Dickinson deals with them in simple manner so that the idea or intention of the poem is clearly visible to the reader. One can comprehend infinite meaning on the poem, and this is one of the crowning pieces of Dickinson because of the way death is personified as gentleman and how the true nature of death causes a realization in the speaker about the eternity of being in grief. Now we are going to see how the poetess personified death in this poem. One of the most striking features of the poem is the personification of death as a kindly gentleman who is escorting the speaker on a leisurely carriage ride. This portrayal contrasts with the more useful, somber, or frightening depiction of death. It suggests that the poet is trying to present death as a natural and inevitable part of life rather than as something to be feared. And now we are going to see how the poetess personified immortality. The poem also personifies immortality, which sits alongside the speaker and the personification of death in the carriage. This presence implies that once the journey has concluded and the speaker has reached her final destination, she will enter a timeless immortal state. Now, we are going to see the journey as a symbol for life in this poem. The carriage ride taken by the speaker, death and immortality, symbolizes the journey of life leading inevitably to death and the afterlife. The various stages of the journey through life are represented by the landmarks they pass on their way, the schools symbolizing childhood and innocence, the fields of ripe grain representing maturity and productivity, the setting sun marking the end of the day and symbolizing the approach of death. Now we are going to see the passage of time from the poem. The poem moves effortlessly from past to present, illustrating the swift passage of time. The opening lines reveal that the speaker is looking back on the event of her own death, demonstrating the fleeting nature of life itself. The poem concludes with the speaker remarking that centuries have passed since the event, illustrating where her speaker now resides after leaving behind her mortal existence. Now we are going to see the theme of eternity from the poem. The final stanza raises the theme of eternity as it's suggested that the speaker has entered an eternal afterlife. Dickinson uses phrases like eternity and so for as the eye could see to invoke the idea of a timelessness and eternal existence, reinforcing the idea that death is merely a transition to another state of being. Thank you.